Good evening. I thought we might spend a little time tonight together, being lonely. I know for a lot of us, this time of year can be very hard. Maybe we've lost someone we loved that we were very close to through an accident, through natural causes, through chronic illness. Maybe we suffer ourselves from chronic illness, and that's made it hard for us to go be with the family we love. So we're left alone during the holidays. Maybe some of us are estranged from our family and our friends for any kind of reason, ideology, who we love. It just depends. And some of us just are sometimes happier by ourselves. At any rate, this time of year it can be hard. And I wanted to acknowledge that grief and to maybe help us come to at least understand and accept it a little better. So I've put together a collection of poems, and I hope these will help you. These are some of my favorite poets. All of them are on Facebook, here on Facebook, and I think maybe they'll help. The first thing that we need to know is that this is by a poet named UGUMC, and it's called See You Later. And she writes, I've learned a few things about grief. It's not a temporary feeling, but rather an eternal one with many changing seasons. Grief hurts in places that are hard to point to because the pain in your heart overflows into every other crevice that exists inside of your body. Sometimes grief longs to be held and pushes you away at the same time. It runs for both freedom and shelter. It wants to heal, but without letting go. Grief lands on your chest whenever and however and wherever it chooses. It's not bound by space or time or distance, and I can guarantee you that it will always find a way to come to the surface. Grief lays its weary head down and waits for rain, for sun, for wild winds, for peace. Oh, precious, precious peace. Grief reminds us that death is not a goodbye, but the longest and the hardest. See you later. Someone unknown wrote that grieving is like having broken ribs. On the outside you look fine, but with every breath it hurts. And then someone else wrote, and a friend of mine posted this, who's going through her own kind of loneliness during the holidays from children that have estranged themselves from her. She posted, imagine living with a scream inside you, and the scream is yours, and no one else hears it. That's grief. UGUMC again writes about learning how to love and live alongside grief in a piece called A Nearby Distance. Me, how long will you stay? Grief, for as long as you love them. Me, will I always be sad? Grief, a part of you, yes. Me, but what about the other parts? Grief, they'll find a new way. Me, a new way for what? Grief, a new way to breathe, to laugh, to walk, to wake up, to create, to experience nature, to see the world, to be courageous, to hear music, to carry hope, to speak their names. A new way to love from a nearby distance. Grief, pain transitions into grief and is very transformative. And someone named Toko Pa Turner wrote the following. We grieve the loves we've lost. We grieve our abilities vanishing through illness or age. We grieve the loss of faith in our religion. We grieve our children leaving home. We grieve the paths that we didn't walk. We grieve the family members we've never had. We grieve the suffering of the planet. While grief may look like an expression of pain that serves no purpose, it's actually the soul's acknowledgement of what we value. Grief is the honor we pay to that which is dear to us. And it's only through the connection to what we cherish that we can know how to move forward. In this way, grief is motion. Yet in our culture, we are deeply unskilled with grief. We hold it at a distance as best we can, both in ourselves and each other, treating it as, Joanna Macy says, like an enemy of cheerfulness. There is unspoken shame associated with grief. It's sanctioned in very few places, in small doses, for exceptional occasions such as death and tragedy. Beyond that, it can feel dangerous and weak. Perhaps because we fear we'll drown in our despair, or because it means falling apart in a world which values holding it together above all else. But grief plays an essential role in our coming undone from previous attachments. It is the necessary current we need to carry us into our next becoming. Without it, we may remain stuck in that area of our life which can limit the whole spectrum of our feeling alive. Grief is the expression of healing in motion. As you make the seemingly bottomless descent, it helps to remember that grief is the downpour your soul has been thirsting for. Because what remains hidden for too long doesn't change. It is calcified in place, often sealed by shame, left untouched and forgotten by time. But when it can finally come into the open to be seen, it's exposed to new conditions and it begins to move. It rises on a salty geyser of tears, sometimes sung to the surface by a terrific moan, streaming down our cheeks until it moistens the soil where we stand, preparing us for new growth. Have you ever noticed how beautiful a person is after they've wept? It's as if they're made new again by the baptism of tears. Indeed, when something stuck can be released through grief, we are freeing up a greater capacity to love. This was published in Turner's book or collection, Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home. Many of us during this longest night are missing a partner or a spouse. The death of a spouse or partner is different than other losses in the sense that it literally changes every single thing in your world going forward. When your spouse dies, the way you eat changes, the way you watch TV changes, your friend circle changes or disappears entirely. Your family dynamic in life changes or disappears entirely. Your financial status changes. It affects your self-worth, your self-esteem, your self-confidence, your rhythms, the way you breathe, your mentality, your brain function. Ever heard of the term widow brain? If you don't know what that is, count yourself very lucky. Your physical body, your hobbies and interests, your sense of security, your sense of humor, your sense of womanhood or manhood, every single thing changes. You're handed a new life that you never asked for and that you don't particularly want. It is the hardest, most gut-wrenching, horrific, life-altering of things to live with. That was published by an unknown author. Reverend Dr. Stephen Cleaver wrote a broader reflection on grief's many dimensions leading to resilience. And he prefaced it with a piece from Brian McLaren. McLaren wrote, "Grief, the feeling of loss, has 1,000 dimensions in this time of doom. Grief for the simplicity of the old life before doom moved in. Grief for the old normal when we assumed our economy was innocent, benevolent, and sustainable. Grief for the loss of our confidence in politicians, institutions, technology, or even democracy being able to protect us. Grief for the paradises paved up to put up parking lots. Grief for beautiful creatures becoming endangered or extinct. Grief for the loss of wild and green places. Grief for our children because of the unstable climate we're leaving them. Grief for what we could have done but didn't. And grief for all the beauty that will be desecrated between this point and the end point. So much grief." Like I said, coming into it tonight, grief is not limited to simply the loss of someone we love. We can grieve a lot of things. As I said, this was a preface to what Reverend Dr. Stephen Cleaver wrote. Dr. Cleaver wrote this: "I wake up each morning and I grieve. It is like a bitter pill caught in my throat, a sad memory, playing in an endless loop in my brain. It is an empty feeling in the pit of my stomach and aching in my bones. It is a hole in my heart, a chasm in my soul. I wake each morning and I grieve the disappointments, the mistakes, my own failures and sin. I wake each morning and I grieve the loss of innocence and comfort, the loss of joy. I grieve the easy, careless days of childhood, the time when I can honestly say I'm proud to be an American. I grieve the loss of dreams now buried in the hate and fear that surround me, in the detritus of my own failure. I feed my grief. It's a cry of the heart. It's a whisper of resistance. It is my unwillingness to accept the way things are. I wake each morning and I grieve, and lifting my eyes unto the hill, seek to live into hope." Uli K, in a piece called Next Door, offers some comfort in the nearness of those we lost. "And when you miss me most, remember that I have only built a house next door, a single breath away. We can whisper through the walls and send love notes in the shape of stars and sunsets and the way that the light glistens on the water just so. And although things are hard for you now, I am not far away. I am absent only in flesh, but my spirit is dancing with the heavenly ones. We will reach each other once again, I promise. Just not yet. Find laughter again, okay? Find music and purpose and ways to feel alive. We are only separated by a glimmer of time, an interval. Take comfort. And I've only built the house next door." Talia Hunter continues the idea that loved ones remain with us in a piece that she wrote. "To the one that is no longer here physically but is still present, though you no longer walk beside me physically, I see you in every memory. I feel you in every heartbeat. I hear you in every song. I know you in every thought. I laugh with you in every joy. I cry with you in every sorrow. For though you no longer walk beside me, you have never truly left me. For I feel your presence with me every step of the way, and you have never truly gone." John O'Donohue brings us deeper into the spiritual perspective of that kind of eternal presence. And this is from his book, Beauty, the Invisible Embrace. The dead are not distant or absent. They are alongside us. When we lose someone to death, we lose their physical image and presence. They slip out of visible form into invisible presence. This alteration of form is the reason we cannot see the dead. But because we cannot see them does not mean that they're not there. Transfigured into eternal form, the dead cannot reverse the journey and even for 1 second re-enter their old form to linger with us a while. Though they cannot reappear, they continue to be near us. And part of the healing of grief is the refinement of our hearts, whereby we come to sense their loving nearness. When we ourselves enter the eternal world and come to see our lives on earth in full view, we may be surprised at the immense assistance and support with which our departed loved ones have accompanied every moment of our lives. In their new transfigured presence, their compassion, understanding, and love take on a divine depth, enabling them to become secret angels, guiding and sheltering the unfolding of our destiny. You know, when you think about it, those folks that have been the most special to you, my grandparents, my brother, my dad, I can feel them. I know when they're nearby. Sometimes you just have to be willing to be still and listen. And isn't that what God tells us to do? To be still and listen. Amanda Held Opelt talks in her piece about collective grief, about communal grief. There are grievers everywhere, people that are suffering under the silent tyranny of grief. We need to make space with them in our rhythms, in our habits, in our Sunday practices, so that they can have those encounters with their grief and be affirmed for what they're feeling. And Jim Rigby wrote a metaphorical exploration of grief's rhythms and its connection to joy. His piece is called Sandcastles. Grief can feel like we're drowning in a deep ocean. It rises up and washes away our personal projects like so many sandcastles. Grief can be uncomfortable under the best of circumstances, but when we fight against it, the agony of grief can be unbearable. Grief can be the body's way of processing great change. Grief has natural rhythms like the tides of an ocean. We cannot speed ahead to avoid the pain of a lost love, but we can live trusting that no pain is eternal. We can remember times when beauty and wisdom blossomed out of our earlier grief. When we honor the process of grief, we're building our capacity for future joy. The energies of grief can be unbearably painful at times, but eventually, if we can slow down and listen, we hear a deep embodied wisdom trying to find its voice within us. Sometimes we can be like waves that have forgotten they belong to something wider and deeper. When we live by and for ourselves, we set ourselves up for tremendous pain. I too belong to the ocean. My blood is like seawater, so are my tears. It's possible to understand grief as primordial life rising to claim its own. Life whispers to us as a friend, not enemy, when it warns in our every personal project, this too belongs to me. Those who can build their sandcastles without forgetting we live within the pulse of deeper tides are never far from joy. Grief comes as a brief storm and then moves on. Our personal experiences are as fleeting as sandcastles, but the creativity expressed through our loves is as eternal as cosmic ocean. John Rodell is probably my favorite of all these poets. And John wrote one about finding hope and meaning. It's a beautiful reminder of authenticity during the holidays. Last night I was visited by the ghost of Yuletide heartbreak, and she told me this. It's okay to not be okay on Christmas. It's okay to be melancholy underneath the mistletoe. It's okay to come apart while they're caroling. It's okay to trace your scars with your fingers. While everyone's singing "Oh Holy Night," it's okay, my love, to hurt during the holidays. Don't hide your healing. Give yourself the gift of being authentic. It's okay to not be okay during Christmas time. It's okay to let the broken pieces inside of you be the only jingle bells you hear. Because, my love, it means you're fighting to stay alive. And I can't think of anything more to celebrate than that. Retired Reverend Bishop Stephen Charleston wrote an uplifting perspective on love's enduring legacy. Many years from now, when the world I know is only an echo, my love will still be alive, still be touching hearts and changing minds, still be bringing people a sense of peace and hope. The love we send out does not disappear. It is carried forward by those who receive it, adding their love to ours, sending it forward, a promise made and remade for generations. Rejoice, your love lives forever. Another meditation, this is a very poignant one on the permanence of love. It was written by Merritt Malloy. When I die, give what's left of me away to children, to old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother, walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give to them what you need to give to me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not on your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. As we close tonight, I want to read some pieces that are called to healing. Again, Uli K encourages us to both hold grief and embrace love in her piece. And the truth is, you will miss them because they are missing from you. The piece that once fit so perfectly into your world, your life, your heart, they were nestled in, embedded, woven into your skin like a blanket, and perhaps we were asked to walk differently after they were gone because everything changes in that moment, everything. Holding brokenness in one hand and light in the other, we will no doubt change our gait to compensate. So while we are limping more profusely in grief, I hope too that we are loving more profusely. Loss can teach us that. May it never be the reason we close up our hearts. And Liz Newman wrote this conclusion, which is a hopeful acknowledgement of love's worth. I don't know what grief will look like tomorrow, but I'll face it. I'll feel it as your memory washes over me, one day at a time, one wave at a time. For such a love, grief is the price of admission, the cost of the human condition. So I'll pay it over and over again until I see you again. The love was worth it. Grief is a natural part of our lives. We can grieve many things, especially those we love, and losing those we love. But whatever the reason, we need to acknowledge our grief. We need to let ourselves grieve. And we need to let others grieve and be there quietly, just waiting for them. I hope you all have a blessed holiday on this, the longest of nights. And know that after every night the sun rises, we'll rise, and we'll be okay. Never forget that we are really never alone, even when no one's here. We always have God with us. We always have Emmanuel. We always have the Spirit. And tonight, if we need to, we have each other. So, take heart, friends. And we'll just see you later. God bless. Peace be with you. Amen.